when did you decide to write the book, and did you ever think you would write the book?
Well, I finished volume 1 unexpectedly, and before that, sometimes I ran dry, especially at the beginning of a description of the Castleford Physic Garden. But I solved that by returning to my fake history hypothesis about the 13 Years' War, and pretending that some people in the West, some monks, including those at Castleford, had continued good relations with Iran. From this I got the idea that the garden would be like a fusion of several real Persian gardens. In reality, of course, the struggle between Islam and the West was pretty well absolute, and only on rare occasions was Persia open to Europeans, and they to Persia.
Yes, the word here in Georgia for garden comes from Persian pari.
Exactly. Remember that the inspiration for this book is Tom's Midnight Garden, which I was teaching in your school at the beginning of the year. Do you remember the opening sentence? If, standing on the back door step, Tom allowed himself to weep tears, they were tears of anger. Now, in this story, the author intends to suggest that Tom actually did weep tears of anger rather than tears about leaving his mother and his brother. She does this so that she can justify his initial hostility to his uncle and aunt, from which, of course, he eventually recovers as he begins to enjoy the magical aspects of his stay. But the grammatical structure of the sentence actually also leaves open the possibility that the entire book which follows is, as it were, qualified by that word if, and so stands on its own. That word if alone seems to allow that a fantasy novel can follow. But the original book is also a quest, a kind of writing you find in many stories, especially stories for and about young people. I think of Alice in Wonderland, and I think of the film Big.
And Harry Potter?
Absolutely. In such stories, usually a young man, although sometimes a young woman, goes to some magical place and is transformed and does strange things, acquires strange powers.
Were you influenced by Harry Potter?
Not really, because I've only ever read the opening and concluding pages of the very first book in the series, when my niece, Beth, then about 16, pointed the book out to me shortly after it came out. I was impressed by the writing, but my taste is not really for such overt magic. But I was surprised how well known Harry Potter is worldwide. I know that from the many students I have had in Hungary, in China, and online.
Can you discuss the role of magic in Tom's Midnight Garden and in your book, The SEA DAFFODIL?
Well, the magical framework in Tom's Midnight Garden revolves around the grandfather clock, which belongs to the old lady. When it strikes 13, it enables a magic garden, previously belonging to the house before it was divided into flats, into which Tom, of course, can venture, and whose time, date and weather he is subject to, although apparently not unduly affected by. For example, because the clock strikes 13 at or just after midnight, he is dressed in light pyjamas when he visits the garden, and even eventually ventures outside it to the city of Ely, still dressed only in a pair of pyjamas and wearing one slipper, the other being left behind to block open his bedroom door. Note that he is invisible. He is a spirit. Only the old lady, a young girl in these visionary episodes, and a strange gardener can see him. I adopted a related but really quite different approach. My Tom is definitely visible and interacts with real, semi-strange and historical people in various different situations. I too have a clock, although in my story, so far, I make more use of a lift in the university library. University libraries often have tall central towers where many books are stored. It seemed to me that you could have a lift which journeys through time, up to go into the future and down to go back in time. If you go to the new shopping mall in Tbilisi, you'll find a lift just like this. The car park levels are especially scary. And that part inspired me for my time travelling idea.